Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper and this week's episode of Crime and Coloring, where we take an alphabetical journey through the United States and revisit some of the earliest crimes. But before we talk crime, let's talk coloring. Today I am shopping my stash. I have selected a Gerda Steiner Designs stamp set. I'm going to create a fall card. I'm using these hedgehogs and the leaf pile. I will be using the Honeybee Stamps deckled edge dies, some pattern paper that I got in like a Target dollar spot 100 years ago. I'm going to do a one-layer scene card, so I'm going to be using some masking, stamped masking paper, and I will be coloring with my Copics on Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I will use my Misty to align the stamps on this piece of paper to get the scene that I'm looking for. I want to have that hedgehog that's kind of laying backwards, floating into a pile of leaves with an umbrella. I'm using some colors that I pulled from that pattern paper pad. I'm stamping in Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink because it is alcohol marker friendly. I still have kind of a scratchy voice from this whole COVID coughing yourself to death thing, so forgive the weird sound in my voice. And I think that's all there is about the coloring. So let's jump into the crime. Our alphabetical journey today takes us to the state of California. Mexico reluctantly ceded California and much of its northern territory to the United States in the 1848 Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. When the Mexican diplomats signed the treaty, they pictured California as a region of sleeping mission towns with a tiny population of about 7,300 people. Not a devastating loss to the Mexican Empire. They may have had different feelings about this loss if they had known that just 9 days before the signing of the treaty, gold was discovered in the California area, and California would soon become the home of the 49ers. And the population of the area, it would increase immensely. Most newly acquired areas of the United States had to wait a little while before they were admitted to the Union, even as territories. There was a population requirement of 60,000 residents that would, under the normal circumstances of California at that time, have taken decades to reach. But when the gold was discovered and the rush was on, it was just a year after the United States acquired the area that California became a territory. The rapid growth allowed Congress to jump quickly into the idea of statehood, and again, quicker than usual. There was also an impending civil war. Slavery was a hot-button issue, and all territories that were admitted to the Union at this time, there was a debate on whether they were free states or slave states. Under the Compromise of 1850, California was admitted to the Union as a free state on September 9, 1850. California is named after a mythical island and is home to the highest and lowest points in the continental United States. There were 3 capital cities before Sacramento was named the permanent capital in 1879. The grizzly bear on the flag is based off of one captured by William Randolph Hearst. After the discovery of oil fields under Los Angeles in the 1890s, California produced about 1/4 of the world's petroleum by 1930. California is home to a 2,700-year-old tree named General Sherman. The Bay Area's Mount Diablo State Park offers the best view in the area. On clear days, 40 of the state's 58 counties are visible. California is a place where hula hoops, skateboards, videotape recorders, wetsuits, and blue jeans were all invented. There are always a few unusual laws. California's include a law that limits how many bathtubs can be installed. and the prohibiting of bowling on city sidewalks. California is also the home of the poet Bandit. Charles Bowles was born in Norfolk, England, to John and Maria Bowles. He was the third of 10 children, having 6 brothers and 3 sisters. When he was 2, his parents immigrated to Jefferson County, New York, and purchased a farm. In late 1849, Charlie, as he was called by then, a cousin, and 2 brothers, David and James, took part in the California Gold Rush. They began mining in the North Fork of the American River in California. Charlie and his cousin mined for only a year before returning home in 1852. But Charlie insisted on returning to California to the goldfields, and this time brought another brother, Robert, with him. Unfortunately, both David and Robert were taken ill and died in California soon after Charlie and Robert returned. Charlie continued to mine for 2 more years before returning home. And then, for some unknown reason, Charlie went to Illinois. He changed the spelling of his last name from Bowles to Boles, and then married Mary Elizabeth Johnson. They were married in 1854. They had 4 children, and by 1860 they had made their home in Decatur, Illinois. By the time Charlie and Mary were living in Illinois, the Civil War was in full swing. Like most able-bodied men of the time, Charlie enlisted in Decatur as a private in Company B of the 116th Illinois Regiment. He proved to be a good soldier, and he rose to the rank of first sergeant within a year. He took part in numerous battles and campaigns, including Vicksburg, where he was seriously wounded, and Sherman's March to the Sea. On June 7th of 1865, he was discharged at Washington, D.C., and then returned home to Illinois. He had received honorary commissions as both a second and then a first lieutenant. The quieter years after the war were not quite what Charlie had in mind for his future. He craved excitement and adventure, maybe a little wanderlust. And by 1867, he was out west prospecting in Idaho and Montana. There was very little known about the life he led, with the exception of one letter to his wife where he mentioned having a problem with some employees of the Wells and Fargo Company. In this letter, he vowed to pay them back for what they had done to him. And this was the last that anyone heard of Charlie, and after a while, even his wife Mary assumed he was dead. In the mid-1800s, there were 2 phenomena that rose to popularity. One was stagecoach robberies, and the other was dime novels. Dime novels were stories that appeared in local newspapers, and they were serial adventures, kind of like the precursor to a comic book. And they included stories about bank robbers, stagecoach holdups, and other exciting fictional crimes. In the summer of 1870, the Sacramento Union ran a story written by William Henry Rhodes under the pseudonym Caxton about a villain dressed in black with long, messy black hair, a long black beard, and crazy green eyes, who robbed Wells Fargo stagecoaches, bringing fear to any who were unlucky enough to cross his path. That villain's name was Black Bart. After the invent of this character for the newspaper dime novels, there appeared on the scene a real stagecoach robber who stood out from the rest. The robber was nice. He asked the driver, please, when he demanded to have the strong box thrown down. It was reported that he had a deep, resonant tone to his voice. He was always polite, and he never used foul language. He also covered his body with sacks and linen to hide his clothing and his features. He was terrified of horses, apparently, and committed all of his crimes on foot. He even left poems at least 2 of his robberies. These abnormal qualities in a robber became unusually distinguishing trademarks, and this particular robber took on the peculiar moniker Black Bart. What does all this have to do with Charlie, the missing Army vet and husband? Well, Charlie was Black Bart. Black Bart committed his first robbery on July 26, 1875 on the road between Copperopolis and Milton, California. Yes, that is a real town, Copperopolis. He wore a long linen duster coat and a bowler hat. His head was covered with a flour sack that had eye holes cut into it, and he brandished a shotgun. When he asked for the driver to throw down the strongbox, he told his backup, his posse that were hiding in the bushes, quote, "If he dares to shoot, give him a solid volley, boys." Bart took the strongbox and disappeared into the bushes before the stagecoach driver even dared to move away. When men returned to the scene of the robbery later, the backup robbers in the bushes were actually just very carefully rigged sticks. This was the first of 28 holdups committed by Black Bart, aka Charlie. The last holdup took place right back where things began, on Funk Hill, southeast of Copperopolis. So the stage had just crossed on the ferry and had stopped to pick up the 19-year-old son of the ferry owner, a young man named Jimmy Rollieri. I think I said that right. The stage, though, had to travel up a steep hill in order to get to the top of Funk Hill. So Jimmy grabbed his rifle and jumped out of the stagecoach and planned to walk around the base of the hill, following the river, doing a little bit of hunting, and then he would meet the stagecoach on the west side. So he did just that. But when he got to the west side of the hill, there was no stagecoach. They hadn't gotten there yet. So Jimmy began walking up the west side of the hill, and as he walked up, he found the stagecoach driver and the horses heading down the hill. The stagecoach driver told him that as the stage approached the top of Funk Hill, Black Bart stepped out from behind a rock with a shotgun, made the driver unhitch the wagon from his team, and then sent them down the west side of the hill. You see, Wells Fargo had started bolting the strongbox to the wagon floors, and Bart needed time to break into the box. And it just so happened that this day there weren't any passengers on the stage. So the driver tells Jimmy the holdup is still technically in progress, and Jimmy follows the driver. His name was Reason McConnell, back up the hill, and they got to the stagecoach just in time to see Black Bart backing out of this coach with the now freed strongbox. Reason grabbed Jimmy's rifle and started firing and missed. Jimmy took the rifle and fired just as Bart ran into a thicket of bushes. Both men saw Bart stumble as he ran off, and they were sure that Jimmy had hit him. They ran toward the brush, and all they found was a mail bundle that Bart had dropped and a trail of bloody letters. That proved that Jimmy hit his mark, but that was all that was there. Bart ran about a quarter of a mile, then stopped. He bandaged up his bloodied hand with a handkerchief. Then he buried his shotgun in a hollowed-out tree, found a rotten log to hide the sack stuffed with gold. He kept $500 in gold coins, and then threw away anything he didn't need to get by or to use in an escape. Naturally, Wells Fargo sent their detective James Hume out to investigate the robbery. Funny little side note, was reported that James looked enough like Charlie Bowles to have been a twin brother. They had the same mustache and everything. Anyway, James found the stash spot that Black Bart had used that day in retrieving the goods. He found several, that's a weird word I shouldn't have a hard time saying, several personal belongings, including one identifying item. a handkerchief with the FX07 laundry mark. The detective and his partner contacted all of the laundries in San Francisco, about 90 of them in the area, until they found the Ferguson and Biggs California laundry. The launderers here were able to identify the handkerchief as belonging to Charles Bowles, who was currently living in a somewhat modest boarding house there in town. In San Francisco, Charles had introduced himself as a mining engineer that required frequent business trips. And upon investigation, it just so happened that all of those business trips aligned with the Wells Fargo stagecoach robberies. Initially, Charlie denied being Black Bart, but for whatever reason, eventually did admit to robbing stagecoaches, but he did not admit to any crimes that happened before 1879, which I thought was interesting, but never really figured out why. When he was booked into jail, he gave his name as T.Z. Spaulding. But when his possessions were examined, they found a Bible that had been a gift from Mary inscribed with his real name. The police report of his arrest stated that Black Bart was, quote, a person of great endurance, exhibited genuine wit under most trying circumstances, and was extremely proper and polite in behavior, eschews profanity. Obviously, Wells Fargo was going to press charges, and Charlie was in fact charged, but only for the last stagecoach robbery. He was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in San Quentin prison, but was released after 4 years because of good behavior. By the time he was released in January of 1888, his health was bad. 4 years in prison had left him deteriorated. He had visibly aged, he had failing eyesight, and he had gone deaf in one ear. When asked if he would return to stagecoach robberies, he replied, quote, no, gentlemen, I'm through with crime. Another reporter asked if he would write more poetry. Charlie laughed and said, now, didn't you hear me say that I'm through with crime? Charlie's last years were as mysterious as his time as Black Bart. He never returned to his wife Mary in Illinois, but he did write to her after his release from prison. And in one of his letters, he wrote that he was tired of being followed around by Wells Fargo. He felt it demoralizing to be under their constant watch. He wanted to get away from everyone. In February of 1888, Charlie was seen leaving a house in Nevada and then vanished. Wells Fargo was able to track him to the Palace Hotel, where the owner of the hotel said a man fitting the description of Black Bart had checked in and then disappeared. And that was the last time that Black Bart, aka Charlie Bowles, was ever seen again. And it was February 28th, 1888. There are 2 poems that have been confirmed to have been written by Black Bart. And the only thing I can figure, so he said he committed all these robberies, nothing before 1879. Well, the first poem was found in 1877 at the first holdup by Black Bart. And it read, I've labored long and hard for bread, for honor, and for riches. But on my corns too long you've tread, you fine-haired sons of... You finish that if you want. The second poem was found at the site of a holdup in July of 1878, and it read, here I lay me down to sleep, to wait the coming morrow, perhaps success, perhaps defeat, and everlasting sorrow. Let come what will, I'll try it on, my condition can't be worse, and if there's money in that box, 'tis money in my purse. And both of those were signed Black Bart. Now, November of 1888, the year that he was released from prison, nearly a year later, another Wells Fargo stage was robbed by a masked highwayman that left a note. And that verse read, so here I've stood while wind and rain have set the trees a sobbin', and risked my life for that box that wasn't worth the robin. So again, Detective James Hume was called in to examine the note, and he compared the handwriting to the other poetry that was signed by Black Bart, and he declared that the new holdup was the work of a copycat criminal. Victoria Tudor was the commissioner of the cemetery in Marysville, California. And she said that Charlie spent his old age living in Marysville, working as a pharmacist, and that his grave was located in the Marysville Cemetery. However, it was also rumored that he was buried in an unmarked grave in the Knights Landing Cemetery in Knights Landing, California. Johnny Thacker, who was a Wells Fargo detective who happened to be there when he was arrested, said in 1897 that he knew Charlie went to live in Japan. And if you want a list of all of the stagecoach robberies attributed to Black Bart, Wikipedia has them. Now, one thing I thought of about this mysterious disappearance of Black Bart was the note. In his confession, he said he had committed stagecoach robberies, but nothing before 1879. And those two notes that were signed Black Bart were written before then. And then he goes to prison, and he's old, and he's falling apart, and he's going blind in one eye and deaf, or losing his eyesight, and he's deaf in one ear. And then there's another note that comes up like a year later, and the handwriting doesn't match. So is it possible that Black Bart, aka Charlie Bowles, didn't actually give up his life of crime? Is it possible that the reason the handwriting didn't match was because Charlie was falling apart, like he was getting old? My handwriting doesn't match my handwriting from, years ago, and I haven't spent any time at San Quentin, but I think that's a possibility. I don't know. I'm just saying he was pretty specific to remove himself from those two poems that were linked to Black Bart. So I don't know. I just think that is pretty, that's a pretty specific detail. And I couldn't find any explanation for that. I just couldn't figure out why he would specifically remove himself from those years. So a lot of people said that James Hume, the detective, looked enough like Charlie to be a twin brother. Well, my thought is, what if it was? This reportedly all started because Charlie had a problem with some employees from Wells Fargo. What if their detective was in fact Charlie or his brother? I'm just saying it could be. Also, that 1888 robbery and note, what if the reason the handwriting didn't match was because Charlie's older and sicker? Does your handwriting look the same as it did 10 years ago? Mine does not. He made a huge point of separating himself from those crimes that those notes are attached to. I also wonder how much Mary knew. I didn't find anything that said how she managed to support her family. Was he sending her money? Did she know what he was doing? Did she know where he went? I want to know. I'm just saying. Here's a picture of Charlie with his bowler hat and his mustache. I'm curious. I would like to know what you think. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the story. I have a couple other videos here I think you would like. I also have a subscribe button. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think about Charlie. Give me a thumbs up, let YouTube know you like the story, and have a really fabulous day.